1, 2, 3, 4.
Bonus episode.
Bonus episode. Bonus
Episode of King of the What Now. Hello, fellow Knights Radiants and fellow inhabitants of Roshar, and welcome to King of the What Now.
The one show
where we know that it's good to fight God.
Absolutely.
If it's not a good God.
I'm glad to see you're finally on Team Kelsier.
No, I'm on a third team that doesn't really like what he's doing, but also doesn't really like that Odium guy very much.
You know, I've got another intro for this episode. Are you ready?
Sure.
And it's only because it's a Sanderson novel, but hello, fellow mentally ill people, and welcome to King of the What Now.
Yeah, I mean, that's especially true for the Stormlight Archive.
I saw somebody saying that this book was the book where all the characters just needed therapy, and honestly, yeah. That's how it was. But we are discussing Wind and Truth, the fifth and final book in the first half of the Stormlight Archive.
Yes, that's a mouthful right there.
It sure is, especially since he plots them each as 3 books, so we've really had 15 books at this point. We're only halfway through the series.
I don't really understand that, because he breaks them into 5 pieces. So, the first 2 chapters, or the first 2 sections are one book, and then the third section is a second really short book, and then, I don't know.
We'll have to ask him if we ever get the chance to talk to him again.
Absolutely. He won't return my calls.
Well, maybe you shouldn't have been texting him weird pictures.
I saw a sill in this piece of toast. Can you tell me, is this a divine message from the cognitive realm?
We've been talking for a while, and the people of the internet don't even know who we are.
What do you mean? Oh, right. Welcome to King of the What Now. I'm your host, Joel, and also, I am a being made of investiture, God energy, trying to imitate life, but the life I'm trying to imitate knows that it's a simulacrum, so things are breaking down. The hologram is not real.
Oh, that's f***ed up. Are you having a bad time?
Bleh.
Oh no, he melted. I was gonna ask him to explain the universe to me. I'm your co-host, Kat, and I have a name that is actually numbers, but it's not like those other people whose names are numbers, and if you compare us, I'm gonna get mad. That's a microaggression? It could even be a macroaggression.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, to be clear, you know that numbers and formulas are different.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Well, you just said... Okay, I'm sorry.
Tell me how they're different, Mr. Computer Calculator Man. Do they both have numbers in them?
Not always. Equations can just be like y, or f of x equals y. Or no, hang on. F of x equals x plus y. It doesn't matter.
I hate that. Do you know why I went into psychology? Because there's no math in it.
Now, just like they're not the Knights Radiants, the Heralds, we have gone into something of a slumber for a while, and then when the world needed us, we returned. If you haven't listened to our catch-up episode, basically, we're going to try to upload when we feel like it and when we have time in our schedule. So there's not going to be a regular upload schedule, but I'm gonna cross my fingers for maybe one a month.
I love my husband so much. This is not a criticism. He's addicted to attention from people on the internet, so I think now that we've put out 2 episodes, I think that's just going to prompt him to do more and more.
Yeah, well, and by the time this one comes out, I think that this will actually be the 3rd one from our glorious return.
Oh yeah, because your super amazing FNAF video is going to be up.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. The other thing to point out is that we are going to try and focus on positives. I am going to bring up one issue shortly that is not necessarily positive, but I want to frame it, I want to explain it so I can explain my interaction with it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. But first, we've got the ADHDs. I was going for something when I started saying this is the 5th book. Oh. We covered the first 2 books. We covered Way of Kings, and we covered Words of Radiance. We have not covered Oathbringer or Rhythm of War. We would like to. We will probably go back and do that at some point. But this book pretty much just came out. It's been a couple of months, but it's new-ish still, so we wanted to get our thoughts on it out while they were fresh. I might actually insist on doing a second Wind and Truth episode after we've gone back and redone Oathbringer and Rhythm of War.
Yeah.
Just because I always feel like I have more to say about these books after the 2nd or 3rd reading.
Yes, that is something that I want to say. There's a lot of book in this book, and something I realized Something I've realized not just about this book, this is especially true for the Locked Tombs trilogy. Well, it's not a trilogy anymore, there's 4 books. But for a lot of pieces of media, I get to the end and I have a certain opinion, whether I liked it, disliked it. Some shows make me cry or feel excited the first time through, but a lot of times if I go through a second time, I have a lot more interaction with it because I can pay attention to like what the foreshadowing means and such. So I have started re-listening to this on Audible, but I haven't gotten very far. But
Audible, you say, where the books are Audible?
That's absolutely correct.
But yeah, no. So we might come back and revisit this. We will definitely be doing a Oathbringer and a Rhythm of War episode. Our first 2 episodes about the Stormlight Archive are not available on the YouTube feed currently. We'll get to it. The other thing I wanted to say is that this is the 5th book in a big series. And like Joel said, there's a lot of book in this book. If you haven't read any of the series or any of the Cosmere even, I don't know that this episode is going to work for you. It's mostly going to be us saying words that sound like nonsense.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of an equivalent. Like, imagine jumping into Endgame if you haven't seen. It's not as big as Endgame, but it's pretty big. It's big scale, and there's been a lot of stuff going on.
What's a shard? Who's a Thaylenah?
Why are there 2 different types of shards? One big and one small.
Yes.
Okay, so a lot of the times when we start these stories, or not these stories, but when we start an episode, we have someone succinctly summarize what happened. And I'm going to be extra. I'm going to do something very interesting for this. And I want to say it's because Brandon Sanderson in the first book had 3 prologues. But it's not exactly because of that. But I'm going to give 3 different summaries at different levels of detail. So the first one is the highest level possible. What the heck is a Roshar? What the heck are the Knights Radiant? In the Cosmere, there are 16 gods. There were 16 gods. For reasons, there are fewer gods now. But there are 16 gods that each represent a specific aspect of the one true god.
In ancient times, Adonalsium was the one true god, and then some fucking heathens messed it all up.
Right, but anyway, so there was one god that was like what you would expect if you've read the Bible, that kind of the one true god. He got split up, and so there's different pieces, and those pieces are like special interest focused on what matters to them. So in this story, we only care about 3. There's only 3 on this planet, but one of them is honor, and the only thing that honor cares about is keeping your word. You could say, I'm going to go up to my neighbor, I'm going to punch him in the face every day. And the power would say, well, so long as you do it every day because you said you would, it would be happy with
That's
that.
honorable.
Right. There's cultivation, who gets the least amount of play but is interested in things growing. And then there's odium. And if you asked odium would say he represents all of God's feelings. But if you ask anyone who's ever spent any time with him, they'll say that's God's wrath. He just hates
God's
everyone.
divine hatred. I love that descriptor specifically.
Yes. If you've read these books, then you know that there's a line about, like, he's all of God's hatred without any of, like, the other things to hold him back. Because it's not a whole god. It's a piece of a god. Okay, so these 3 gods come to this planet, and basically Honor and Odium are fighting each other. Honor hates Odium, and Odium loves war. And so they just keep fighting each other, and they've made an agreement, and because Honor is the power of honor, that agreement must be held. Odium wants to get the heck off this planet, and he wants to eat all of the other shards. He doesn't want to eat them.
He wants to murder them without murdering them so that he can eat them without eating them.
No, he wants to murder them without eating them. That's the distinction here. So basically that's it. You have what's essentially spiritual warfare going on with 2 gods that each have their own forms of power. And there seems to be a lot of copying off of each other's homework. And you know what I mean? Like, you have the 10 surges that Honor can bestow to people, or as related to his powers, but Odium also has 9 ranks of people who also use the surges. And, like, the surges, as far as I can tell, are unique to Roshar. There's not a division power in Scadrial, as far as we know.
I'm gonna back up, sort of.
Yeah.
The surges are the fundamental laws of the universe. I don't know why they haven't come up as much anywhere else. But, like, one of the surges is adhesion. Iron pulling. That's adhesion at work.
What?
Yeah.
No.
It is.
Can't be.
It is, though.
It's magnetism, isn't it?
Yes, but it's also... Trust me, all of the laws work the same.
Well, no, I know they do, but I'm just saying... Yeah, preservation does not go up to you and say, bam, you can do cohesion. He says, bam, eat some metal, and now you can sense emotions.
Eat a little piece of my body, and now you can do shit.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's very Christian, too. We'll get into that.
So there's these three gods, they're fighting each other. One of them's kind of off in the corner, and as far as anyone really cares, they're like, oh, she's a coward, she's not really fighting. And then the other two are big, beefy men who want to punch each other. And there is a lot. There is a long list of things that happen in this book. Not this book, this series. So we have 3 shards. We have 4 ancient gods. We have 10 heralds. We have 10 orders of knights radiant that each control 2 surges. There's 10 surges. There's 9 unmade. There's 9 brands of fused. There are singers, there are listeners, and there are...
Regals?
Yeah, there's regals, and then there's different kingdoms on the planet. There's a secret race of bug people who are not important to these books so
Shockingly,
far.
yeah.
Shockingly.
There's some blue people, also not relevant.
Right. There's people who bond to what are called higher spren. There are armor spren. It's all crazy. Each of those Knights Radiant that I mentioned have 5 ranks of power that they can achieve.
Do you see what I mean, though, listener, if you have no idea what this series is? Because you're probably sitting there going, what the f*** is a spren?
Yes.
What is it? And I'm gonna watch my swearing, because I think that's now like 4 times Joel's gonna have to bleep out. But it's funny to me to hear the little buggy honk sound.
Yeah. So if you're one of those people who listens to people that you enjoy listening to, even if they talk about, you know what I mean? Like some people, they only watch videos about things that they know about. I like One Piece, I might watch videos about One Piece. But there are YouTube creators where I will watch what they put out, even if they're talking about something I've never interacted with, or if they're reviewing a show that I've never watched. So if you're listening to us without having read the books, this is going to be a bunch of nonsense. But let me get into my second prologue, my second summary of events.
Okay, we're at the highest level, now we're going 1 level deeper.
Right, where I'm going to kind of talk about the books as a whole leading up to this book. So like I said, the background is that there's 2 gods that are trying to fight each other. And the way that Honor is trying to rally his troops is that humans, and actually the other race that lives on Roshar called... I don't know what the correct term is for all of them, because there's a group called the Listeners and there's a group called the Singers, and technically those are 2 allegiances within the same people. I'm going to say Parshendi. That's actually kind of a racist term a little bit in the universe, but like I think it's the easiest way to refer to all of the people who can take on different forms.
Yes, the crab people. You could call them crab people.
The crab people. Goodness, I am not good at summarizing this.
You're doing your best, man.
People can bond with basically what are fairies, what are basically this world's fairies, and each type of fairy has a different kind of ideal that they want to live up to. So our main character, like there's several main characters, but our main character is Kaladin, and he's all about protecting people, and he has to swear different oaths, and the first oath is the same for everyone. It's strength before weakness, honor, or journey before destination, life before death. But then like the second ideal for Kaladin, I think was something like, I will protect even those that I hate, and then the third ideal was something else. No, the third ideal was I'll protect those that I don't hate, and the second one is I will protect those who are too weak to protect themselves. Something like that. So he is like autistically special interest about protecting people.
That's the second time you've said it like that. I just want to be clear that we are both on this podcast neurodivergent. So we're not trying to make fun of people.
No. I'm just saying that like in this book specifically, there will be bad guys who will be like, I know how to trick the Windrunners. I'm going to say that someone's hurt, and they're going to be so overwhelmed with the need to protect that they will run off and they will abandon the fight they're currently in to protect that one person, and that is their weakness. We can exploit that. And then, there's like edge dancers. There's one of them that's really cool. They're all about healing and remembering the lost kind of a thing. Dalinar is a really important guy. He's a bondsmith, which is all about uniting people. So basically, in the first book, you think it's about 2 groups of people that are going to war. You think that a king has died. A king has died. They're not lying about that. But you think that it's humans trying to get revenge for their dead king. But it turns out, the Parshendi, the Listeners, the crab people, they actually remember more history better than the humans do. And what they know is going to happen is that one of their old gods is going to come back. It has been so long since Odium f***ed up any of their shit that they don't remember there's a guy who wants to kill them. but the other people do. And they're like, we don't want him to come back. So all of these books are kind of like they're slowly figuring out more and more about the world until eventually we get to the end of book 4, where we now know that there's a guy named Odium. We now know that he wants to destroy the planet. We now know that he's bad. And Dalinar, who's another one of our 3 main characters, says, I challenge you to a duel. In 10 days, we will meet here. We will have a contest of champions where I will pick someone who is willing on my side. You will pick someone who's willing on your side. And whoever wins, certain things will happen. I think that if Odium wins, he's like allowed to rule the entire planet, I believe. But if our guys win, who are the good guys? If they win, then Odium has to back off to another planet where he's not allowed to interfere with the planet that they're currently on.
Yes, I'm going to jump in here really quick. The agreement was that either way, both sides will get to hold whatever land that they've taken in the interim before the contest happens. Odium will either leave the humans alone and not war with them if he loses, or Dalinar will join him and they'll sally forth into the Cosmere to do murder.
I believe that no matter what happens, Odium would be stuck here. I think that is no matter whether he wins or loses, he'll be here for 1,000 years, but he's allowed to use Dalinar as his pawn and basically send him out as an advance force to conquer.
Yeah, and if you haven't read these books in a while, Dalinar's the best at murdering. So like that would be really bad for the Cosmere.
Absolutely. Other characters of importance, there's a man named Szeth, who is from a place called Shinovar, and we know very little about Shinovar, but like they're the weirdos. Like every other race of nation, every other nationality is like, those Shin people are super weird.
They're like Amish.
A little bit, yeah. They feel like they're very low tech, and yeah, exactly like the Amish, like you're describing. Look, I was in my mind, I was like, it's different, and I was like, no, it's pretty similar when you think about it. But he was the assassin who killed that king I mentioned. And he's been on a journey. All of these characters have been on journeys, but like he was a bad guy, and now he's slowly becoming a good guy, but he still doesn't seem completely all there. Like every character who looks at him goes, this character is insane. And he wants to go back to his homeland, and he wants to cleanse the land of evil. And we don't know what that means, but that sounds bad. So are you going to do a bunch of murders? And then Shallan's the other really main important principal character who's a Knight Radiant, and she's been flirting with a group called the Ghostbloods. And the Ghostbloods are Brandon Sanderson's way of telling you that there's a bigger universe out there. Like, imagine you're watching Iron Man 2, and he's fighting Whiplash or whatever, and War Machine's there, and Justin Hammer's doing a stupid little dance. And then imagine someone, like, leans over and goes, hey, Justin Hammer's brother is actually a Skrull, a shape-shifting alien, and you're like, he's what now? And then it never comes up in Iron Man 2, and you're like, what the fuck was that? And then 3 movies later, they're like, oh, by the way, the Skrull are here, they're an invading alien force, and you're like, they mentioned it in Iron Man 2! The Skrulls weren't in Iron Man 2, of course, but that's what I'm saying, it's like that.
Yeah.
The Ghostbloods are characters from other books and other worlds that are not directly important to this, but because Sanderson wants his other worlds to interact with Roshar, they're there in the background, and they're important to Shallan's story specifically.
I don't have any tattoos, but I low-key want a Ghostblood tattoo real bad, because they're run by my favorite man, who we will get to later.
Not really. He's not in this book.
Honorary mention. We'll get to him
mention. He's actually
later.
Yes.
If you think I'm going to be normal when the Ghostbloods books start coming out, you're wrong. I'm not going to be normal.
No, I know you're not going to be normal, but we don't have to talk about them now because they're irrelevant.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I hope that was clear as mud, my description of all the different characters that are running around.
So far, very succinct, I think.
Yes, absolutely. So now what is this book about? This book is about those 10 days that I was mentioning. And the way I see it, we have, how many people do I have here? I have 6 lists here. We have 6 journeys that people are going on. Not 6 characters, because some of these have multiple characters in them. But like at the very beginning, they kind of get sent to the different areas. So who do we have? We have Kaladin and Szeth going to Shinovar to cleanse the land. Kaladin is trying to help Szeth and trying to help this ancient guy named Ashar. Szeth wants to do a bunch of murders, as far as we can tell, maybe. We have Adolin, who is one of your favorite characters.
Love him.
He does not have powers, and that is very important to his character. People keep bringing it up, but he is one of the most important princes in the world, and he's going to fight for the Azish Empire, which is this huge empire that they're allies with the guys that we like. So Adolin's going to protect them.
It would be, como se dice, bad.
If their land was conquered. Yeah, absolutely. We have Jasnah, who is my favorite character, but unfortunately, like the Ghost Blood, she's only there to be set up for later books. She's awesome, but she's in Thaylenah, and she gets very little play, and then her story ends, I would say, earlier than the others. Pretty definitively as well.
It was a real bummer, too. I mean, in a lot of ways, this whole book was, in like, you know, it hurt so good, but Jasnah especially was like, God.
Yep.
We'll get to it.
Speaking of, the next character I wanted to bring up is Sigil on the Shattered Plains.
Ooh.
Now, here's the thing about Sigil. If you haven't been reading all of these books, or if you have been reading these books but you've only been sticking to the Stormlight Archive, spoilers ahead. Skip ahead about 30 seconds if you do not want spoilers. Brandon Sanderson wrote a book called Sunlit Man, and it takes place after this book. And at first, you're not sure who the main character is. You might be able to guess, but like eventually you go, oh shit, that's Sigil. This is Sigil, and you get hints as to what happened on Roshar.
So we spent this whole book being like, why and how and what.
Right. So if you were aware of other stuff happening, you were worried about what was going to happen with Sigil's story. And the land Sigil is trying to protect is very important to Odium, and we don't know why. And our characters don't know why either. Sigil doesn't know that this land is super important. He just knows that he wants to keep it. But there's something else going on here. We have Dalinar and kind of Navani. Navani's sort of on her own journey. She doesn't get a lot of play in this book. She's also a book 6 through 10 character. But they're looking for Honor's lost power. And if they can find it, Dalinar is pretty sure he'll be able to use Honor's power, the power of a god, to fight Odium, the other god. And then we also have R'lain, Renarin, and Shallan, who are also in the spiritual realm. They're Team B. They didn't want to be here. They got sucked into a magic portal. But they are trying to look for another god with a lowercase g named Ba-Ado Mishram, who's somewhere in the spiritual realm, and they also don't know why she's in the spiritual realm, and the spiritual realm can show you the past and kind of also maybe sort of the future, and so they're going to learn some personal truths about themselves and about the land before they're able to complete their mission.
You know what's really funny to me?
What's
and
that?
I'll explain why it's funny in a minute, but you left a big character arc off of this list.
I did.
You didn't include Venli.
Well,
So Venli is our listener point of view character, and it's funny to me that you left her off the list because Brandon Sanderson tends to have themes of racism and classism, or one or the other, in all of his books, right? It comes up a lot, probably because it's a very human struggle, and there's no human society without it.
and without our one true god, we fall into disarray and we start hurting each other.
I'm pretty sure there was racism when Adonalsium was around. Do you think the dragons just, like, chilled with the people? We'll get to dragons.
They're biologically superior, just so you know.
Well, they're dragons.
They have an advantage.
Anyway, the humans were not native to Roshar. They came here. And when they came here, the listeners were like, yeah, you know what? Well, the singers at the time. The singers were like, you guys can live on this little patch of land over here. That patch of land was eventually Shinovar, and stay there. Right? Just don't go anywhere else. And the humans for a while were like, okay, yeah, that's cool. Actually, you know what? This planet should be ours. Just the whole thing. Whole thing should be ours. So the singers and the listeners were pretty much fought back into a corner by the humans, and now the humans kind of are dominant over Roshar. Venli is our listener POV, and she is here to talk about, like, what they're finding on the Shattered Plains.
Right. So in my list, the reason I left her off, I also didn't include Zyle and what's her name? Lift. Because they're not major. Venli is here and she has a major part to play in future, but she's really just sucked into Sigil's story.
That's true. They did find Odium's perpendicularity.
Perpendicularity.
This is a fantasy series.
This is a fantasy series with a group called Szeth and another group called Array, which are very computer science-oriented terms. Okay, and also we're going to get spaceships by the time that Stormlight 6 comes out, and key cards, so, fantasy. So I didn't really summarize those 6 story points at all. I basically just said, here's the characters and where they are, before we get into more details. Before reading this book, did you have anything that you, A, expected to happen, or B, wanted to happen?
Yes, so my predictions for this book centered around kind of two characters, right? Kaladin and Dalinar.
Yep.
And I kept going back and forth to myself about like, okay, so we've got Honor's Champion and we've got Odium's Champion. And what are we going to do? How are we going to manage this? And I liked the idea of Kaladin being Honor's Champion because he had this whole arc for the first 4 books about trying so hard to protect people and not being able to. And I thought it would be kind of cool if he could like step into the role of the ultimate protector.
And really quick, the Stormfather, I swear to God, if you are someone who is new to this Cosmere,
Just leave.
good
Why
luck.
are you here?
No. We like viewer retention. But there's a guy who is like a second place version of Honor, like a depowered Honor who's very important. He basically takes the place of Honor while he's gone.
I've got a better explanation. Are you ready?
Okay.
Okay. Imagine you made a VTuber of yourself, and then that VTuber self gained sentience.
Right, but it doesn't have all of your memories.
Right.
Or, I mean, yeah.
It was sort of you, but sort of not, and also it can talk to whoever it wants.
Yes, but this character, the Stormfather, addresses almost all humans as children of Tanavast. Tanavast is the guy who had the power of Honor, and then he died. But the Stormfather calls Kaladin son of Honor, which is the power of Honor. So, like, there's some connection there. Every time Kaladin swears an oath, there's, like, a huge burst of power, and it's more power than any of the other orders when they swear oaths. So there's something special about Kaladin.
Right. Sliding back a little bit, so I thought maybe he was going to be Honor's Champion.
Seemed likely, yeah. Or possible.
For Odium's Champion, I also have kind of two minds, right? Because Dalinar being named Odium's Champion would be kind of a fucked up thing to have happen.
Okay.
But he has served Odium his entire life. They make a point of that in this book. I don't feel like it was leaned on as heavily in other books except for Oathbringer.
Oathbringer was huge on that.
But the first 2 books in the 4th book, they really didn't have anything to do with Dalinar at all. Oathbringer was his book. I'm getting distracted. Don't distract me. But yes, Dalinar serves Odium. He's a very passionate man. He lives by his anger. He killed his wife accidentally because he got really mad at someone for kidnapping her. So, and then afterward he was like, well, it's her fault. What was she doing there? So he's a very angry man. So he would have made sense as Odium's Champion, and it would have been neat to see how do they get out of this. But there was somebody who I thought was thematically more appropriate. Over the course of this series, we've been seeing Adolin, like, give in to those passionate feelings.
He murdered a dude.
He murdered a dude because he was mad, yes. And Kaladin and Adolin are married.
Okay.
Like, they're boyfriends. And so I thought it would be really satisfying to see them have to, like, face off against each other. And they both, like, believe in their ideals and the people. But Adolin is like, my dad killed my mom. Like, I can't do this anymore. And Kaladin's like, but we live here and Odium's bad. So, you know, maybe we don't want him to win. So that would have been a cool fight. That's kind of what I was thinking might happen when we went into this book.
Did you have any, like, wishes? Any you have a birthday cake, you blow out the candles, things that you didn't think were likely, but you wanted to happen?
Adolin, Kaladin, Shallan, throuple?
Okay.
Would have been good.
Okay.
Just like wishes that were never going to be in the actual canon. I wanted Thaylenah to show up really bad. So earlier I mentioned the boss of the Ghostbloods is my favorite guy. He's the best. He's incredible. His name is Thaylenah, and he is from another series. So I'm not going to spoil anything for that if you haven't been watching.
If you're new to the Cosmere, I think it is best to try to read them in published order. His earlier books are not his strongest. He's gotten better as a writer, but there will be characters who show up, and it'll be like, he had striking blue eyes and a mark on his left cheek, and he had a red sword. And you're like, that sounds kind of cool. But if you've read The Man with the Red Sword, you recognize that's the character from that book.
That's
he
the
had
man
the blue
with
eyes.
the red sword and the
Yes.
blue eyes. Yes. So definitely read the other books first. Sanderson says that Stormlight is the book that you read when you trust him. Can I tell the story really quick of how I got into this?
Yeah.
And then I'll go back to Thaylenah. So my parents won't buy me books for Christmas anymore because I am such a voracious reader and I read so quickly that they buy me a book and I've finished it like the next day. So when my dad saw a coworker reading the first Stormlight Archive book, Way of Kings, he was like, that book is huge. What is that book? And his coworker goes, oh, it's a fantasy book. It's by one of the best fantasy authors in the country, New York Times bestselling author. And he goes, my daughter reads fantasy. My daughter needs a book that is heavier than both of her laptops in her backpack combined. I will buy this for her, and it might take her more than a day to read it.
You could probably kill someone with Way of Kings. You definitely could with Wind and Truth.
It's so big, they had to use thinner paper so that it wouldn't be too heavy. But anyway, so they bought me this book, and I just devoured it. I was like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever read. And then I read everything else Brandon Sanderson has written because that's the kind of person I am. But I talked you into reading Way of Kings.
We have told this story on the Way of Kings episode, but we can tell an abbreviated version.
Yeah, but I talked you into reading it, and you were like, until you got to the end, and you were like, oh my god.
That is something, we alluded to it earlier, and I want to circle back again. For anyone who, again, is only passingly familiar with these books, the main theme generally seems to be mental illness. The two, like I said, there's three main characters, but Kaladin is textbook depressed in the first book. Like, people who read that are like, he spends a lot of time moping around. That was my complaint about him as well, before I started showing the symptoms of depression myself. But Kaladin is depression, and Shallan is kind of like, she has problems with memory. She's done things that are so horrible that she's locked those memories away, and she also has the comic book version of multiple personalities. Though it does not work that way in real life, but it works that way in this fantasy setting. So, like, there is mental illness, and the further along their ideals they get, it seems to generally be that you are more at peace with yourself. You've come to love yourself a little bit more. But because this book is about mental illness, and because that is a long journey to take, and because this is a big series, this is a series where eventually they're going to fight God, JRPG style, it has a slow start. But then you get to the end of the first book, and it's awesome.
If you're me, and you read books at top speed, then it doesn't take you 6 months to get to the really cool stuff. It takes you about a week. But if you are a normal person with a normal reading speed, it might take longer and it might be more annoying, which is why it's the series you read when you trust Brandon. If I were going to do it over again, I probably would have started Joel on Mistborn because it's a much faster-paced, action-oriented trilogy.
I think that if I had started with Warbreaker, that I would have been set. I personally am not as big of a fan of Mistborn as everyone else is. You hyped it up so much that when I read it, I was like, this is fine, but remember what I said earlier, when I reread things, I like them better. When I reread all of Mistborn last summer on audiobook, I liked it better. I still don't love it, but I liked it better.
Yeah. But yeah, I really like Mistborn. I think it's an easy point of entry. It's very comic booky for anybody who's into that. Joel really liked Warbreaker. Warbreaker did not work for me. Elantris is his first published novel, and I think that's one of the best standalones because it literally is a standalone novel. And it's got zombies in it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So we were telling all of that story to make a point about Thaylenah.
Were we?
Yes.
Oh, I got lost. No, but I have no idea what point I was trying to make.
I think you were going to talk about your desire for Thaylenah to be in this book in some capacity, in a greater role.
Yeah, so part of the problem with this being a big universe-spanning Avengers book is that fan faves are going to show up, but nobody's going to get as much of their fave as they want, right? I have spent the entire Marvel run going, I think Secret Wars would be kind of cool. They could do that in a cool way. And then they finally did it, and I was like, this sucks. I didn't actually watch the Secret Wars show, but I didn't like what I heard about it.
Secret Wars has not come out yet. You're thinking of Secret Invasion. Secret Wars is the Battle World story we're going to
That's the one that I keep calling Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yes. It's hard being me. Like, actually.
I was trying to think, like, could I start that whole thing over? But I don't even remember how I started it. So no, we're just going to keep going.
We're all mentally ill.
We're just rolling. Oh, man. ADHD is a developmental disability, not a mental illness. But anyway, So you want your fave to show up. When they do inevitably show up, you're probably like, but we didn't get enough time with them. Because there's so many other characters, and the point isn't actually that they're there. Right? Thaylenah, in his brief appearance, it was really just set up for Era 2. He's not going to come back until, I think, 2036 is when we're supposed to get the next book. I checked my watch. I don't know why. That doesn't tell me anything about the year. But it's going to be a while, basically.
Yes.
So meanwhile, I will just be on AO3.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing to point out, too, is that the books are supposed to be self-contained within their series. So theoretically, if you have never read anything but Stormlight Archives, it should all make sense. There's things that are going to make you go, what? Like the bug people I mentioned earlier. There are there's a species of hive mind bugs that can all slurp together and look like a person.
So cool!
But they are not explained in these 5 books. They're not from any of the other books, as far as I know. They're just kind of a hint of something else. So if you've only read the Stormlight Archives and not Mistborn, Elantris, all the other ones, there might be things that show up and you might go, oh, Sanderson's going to explain that. And no. He has explained that. There are a couple of characters in, I think each book after the second one introduced at least one character who was a named character from another book.
I'm just a quick aside for you. Where was Vivenna in this book?
She went to Cultivation's Perpendicularity, which we know nothing about because that's a book 6 through 10 thing.
Oh, she's up at the Horneater Peaks.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, that means nothing to anybody. I realized
that means
I
something
lost
to people
track
who read
of her.
these books.
Yes. Okay, where were we on discussions? Things we wanted to see in this book. I did not want to see Kaladin and Syl kiss, but I think maybe you did.
We're talking about what you wanted to see.
Yes,
right
I'm just thinking like through the things that I wanted.
What did you want for Adolin, now that he's mad at his dad? Did you want them to make up, or did you want Adolin to become the champion? Was that what you wanted?
I didn't want him to become the champion. I wanted him to make up with his dad. Here's the thing. I like what Sanderson has given me. At no step in this series has it been written the way that I would have written it. Which makes sense, because Brandon Sanderson is Brandon Sanderson, and I'm Catherine, whatever my last name is. Like,
I'm Catherine.
Exactly. We have different experiences, and we're going to write things differently. And I don't think that the way I would have written some of these character arcs, I would have written better. But there were things that I wanted that I didn't get. So I got no resolution, for example, on Shallan and Jasnah. They had a relationship that was damaged at the end of the first book, and we never really got to the point where their relationship was repaired.
Yeah.
Adolin and his dad have these problems, and Adolin murdered a guy, and I thought there was going to be, like,
blowout,
genuine consequences, and there were not really any consequences. And all of these places that Sanderson took the books, like I said, I liked, but some of that, like, interpersonal spicy drama was missing.
Yeah, or it manifested in a way that kind of wasn't what you wanted.
Right.
Okay. So, things that I was predicting. I believe that Dalinar said at the end of the 4th book that he was going to be the champion. And I thought there was a possibility that, like, someone would show up. And I think Adolin would have been my number 2 choice, just because he is the greatest duelist in all the world, or at least that's what people have called him that. And so I thought, oh, that'd be kind of cool. It would be him representing his dad. It would potentially represent their relationship getting fixed. That'd be kind of cool. Kaladin had sworn the 4th ideal, and there's a total of 5. So I guessed, I was hoping that Kaladin would get his 5th in this book. And then the other thing, I am now convinced that Syl is going to manifest in a physical way in this book series. Maybe not book 5, maybe not book 6. I thought maybe like book 10, she'll be like a human person.
My girl learned to pick up a pen.
Right. I don't know if she's going to kiss Kaladin, because close friendships can often feel romantic. How many people talk about Sam and Frodo as being like a couple, but they're just really good friends? But it's possible that it would be a romantic thing. I kind of jokingly brought it up like, oh, when are they going to kiss? But no, I really do think she's going to become a physical presence at some point. And then the other thing is that I thought there's a thing called the Oath Gate, not the Oath Gate, the Oath Pact. It's 10 people who all got into a circle and they said, we will stand against the darkness. And then 9 of them said, we will no longer stand against the darkness. And the 10th guy was the only guy holding back the darkness.
They were like, you know what? If we leave that guy, it'll probably be fine as long as there's one person, right? And none of them were like, maybe this is a dick thing to do.
Right. Because they're mentally ill too. But I thought that Kaladin was going to become that guy. I thought he was going to become the new version of that guy because that guy suffered for 4,000 years. And I thought Kaladin was going to be like, I'm up, boss. I'll suffer for 4,000 years. And then the next book I thought was going to be thousands of years later, and I thought that there was going to be someone else who got the baton from Kaladin. Kaladin was going to be like, it's your turn next, All Might style.
I do like that because, say it with me, Kaladin is Jesus! I'm going to have to find the YouTuber who did that bit so we can shout her out, because I really liked that. But no, he was definitely set up to be this, like, die for humanity's sins figure. And he eventually got there, just not the way that we thought he might.
Yeah, absolutely. Sanderson has started doing a 2025 lecture series. He's been a professor at Brigham Young University for years, but every once in a while he, out of the kindness of his heart, records them and puts them up on YouTube. And he mentioned in one of them recently that it doesn't really matter. Well, it kind of matters, but foreshadowing is not ruined if a portion of your audience can see what's coming before it happens, because the payoff is still good. And it's still, there's going to be someone who misses the little things, and then when they go back and they reread it, they go, oh, I get it. So
I still feel so stupid that I didn't call any of the things that happened in Mistborn, and you texted me every single one, like the chapter before they were explained.
Sanderson's really good at dropping hints, and I'm very, like,
you're pattern-oriented.
I have a superpower, and it's that I can divide my mind into two, so while one is reading, the other one is contemplating what it could all mean. I don't actually think that highly of myself, but I do, like, once I stop, if I have to put the book down to go brush my teeth, while I'm brushing my teeth, I try to pick at what's happening and try to be like, is there any threads that he's, like, left dangling that
while I'm reading, I'm typically just vibing.
Yes. What did you think was going on with Adolin and Maya? Maya was his sword who was starting to come back to life.
Yes, okay, that was a prediction that I had. So, in this universe, the bond between Spren and human is called the Nahale bond.
And Spren are those fairies I mentioned earlier.
And if you break your oaths, it murders your Spren. They become something called a Deadeye, which is a Spren who walks around with its eyes scratched out and can only go, ugh!
And they're also monochrome compared to, like, their lively selves.
Yes. Adolin goes to the realm where the Spren live, and he runs into the ghost of his sword. And this whole time, Adolin's been, like, talking to his sword. And
like, even before he knew what the cognitive realm was.
Right, yeah. He never gave it a name because he thought that was disrespectful to whatever the sword's actual name was. So when he discovered that she did have a name and she was a person, he started talking to her even more using that name. And that started to bring her back from the brink. And so I was really excited about this. I thought we were going to get a sort of reverse Nahale bond where he was the Spren and this sword was the person. Kind of like she was going to get the powers.
Yes,
we didn't really get that, but I liked what we got.
Absolutely. And then I feel like I had other predictions, but they've now kind of gone. I thought for sure, and we'll talk about this. We'll talk about this in theories. Remind me to talk about this. But I thought something special was going to happen when you got to the 5th ideal. Like, I thought, because in this universe, when you get to the 3rd ideal, you get the sword. And when you get to the 4th ideal, you get the armor. And we had not in present time seen anyone get to 5. So I was like, what is 5? And we might have an answer, or we might not, because there's 5 more books in the series.
If you're Szeth, you become the law. Anything else you wanted to see, or any other predictions that you had? Anything for Jasnah that you wanted or predicted?
Unfortunately, we don't know enough about Jasnah.
You know what I wanted predicted so bad?
What's that?
Jasnah Chris.
Oh, yeah.
Chrysala is a scholar. She pops up in some books and she goes, haha, I know everything about magic. Here's some science knowledge. And then she disappears. And I love her so much, and I want her and Jasnah to kiss.
Okay. What I wanted to see is I wanted to know exactly how the Unmade were made. because there's always another secret. Something's going on with the Unmade, and I want to know what it is. And then the other thing was, and I don't even count this as a prediction because someone else told me, but if you pay attention, there's clues that Shallan's mom is someone important, and a lot of people eventually came to the conclusion that her mom was one of the 10 people that did the Oath Pact, one of the 9 that said that guy in particular. And once you look at like all the clues, it was like, oh, this is super obviously true.
You know what's annoying to me about that?
What's that?
It was super obviously true, but every time someone said something about it, I was like, that's stupid.
Oh, yeah.
I hate that.
Oh.
I hate the main character being one of the most special people.
No. So Odium has to choose a champion. And there were people who predicted based off of, like, the themes and whatever, that a baby named Gavinor, who's I think 6 maybe, was going to become Odium's champion. And I hated that idea. And we'll get to it. We'll figure out who Odium's champion is, and we will talk about whether it makes sense or not. But that was one that I really did not like going into this book. I was like, please, no, can't be.
Absolutely.
Okay, so would you like to talk about which of these... Actually, you know what? That makes more sense. Let's talk about out of the kind of 6 stories that I highlighted, right? Kaladin. Szeth is one, Dalinar is another one. Which one, when you kind of started to see the shape of their journey, were you most excited about?
Adolin.
Okay. How come?
It was the most intense. Okay, so first of all, like you said, this is a 10-day thing, right? So he told you every time you got to the end of a day. So every time I heard the little 24 doo-doo, doo-doo, doo-doo sound in my head, and Adolin was in the situation with the most tension. He was trying to survive basically an unsurvivable, what do you call it when you're trying to hold an area? Yeah, a siege.
A reverse siege, though.
Yes.
Because they're trying to, anyways.
They're trying to hold people in a spot. But no, he was trying to survive this, like, ultimately unsurvivable siege situation, and things just got worse for him every day.
Yes.
They were supposed to get backup, and the backup never came, and then they ran out of Stormlight, and then, and it just kept getting worse. So I was really invested in what was happening with him because I needed him to be okay.
Absolutely.
My mental health hinges on this single character surviving.
Well, and see, I feel... Okay, there are 2 battle scenes that are playing out over all 10 days, basically. And that is Adolin and Azimir in Sigil on the Shattered Plains. And I think we get more detail of Adolin, where Sanderson is like, this situation is bad. This situation is really bad. You thought it was bad before, it's getting worse now. So we spend a lot of time with Adolin, and you can feel the rock in the hard place, the proverbial things that you're stuck between.
I'm stuck in there, yeah.
But I think that Sigil's had more emotional resonance because the Windrunners are a family. We have been with Bridge 4 since the beginning. And Moash was there. Moash, everyone's most hated guy. And so, like, I think that we got less of the Shattered Plains, but it was even more dire. It was even more like people are dying left and right. This sucks.
People we care about are dying. I don't know. Something about it, when I read it this time, didn't hit me. I also should say I have a very different experience actually physically reading a book than listening to the audiobook or having it read to me. And I experienced this book almost entirely you reading it to me. And I think there was a level of disconnect there that I wouldn't have gotten if I had just read the book myself.
Okay.
So when I reread it for the next time we do an episode of this podcast about this book, I'm going to read it myself and I'm going to see how that reevaluates some of my interactions with it. But yeah, it was a very emotional, the Sigil arc was a very emotional arc. I think I didn't want to read it because Sunlit Man kind of spoiled the end of it for me and I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be in that place. I knew it was going to be unpleasant. Didn't want it.
Okay, yeah. So I'm looking at the list of 6 storylines that I was kind of most interested on, and I guess the way that the story started to play out, I was kind of most interested in Dalinar's story because, like, Dalinar was going to be basically time traveling. Not really, he couldn't affect the past, but he was going to see the past. He was going to get visions. And I was kind of interested in some of those secrets. But now, having reached the end of the book, I guess I was going to talk about, like, how each of these stories ended in a second as a later point. But I guess it sounds like a cool idea, and then in practice, I don't like it as much as I thought I was going to. I think I was also pretty interested in Kaladin and Szeth. So Kaladin's thing is he basically is no longer, I mean, not basically, he's no longer a soldier. So he's did the first 4 books trying to basically be the best soldier he could be, and eventually he realized, like, I'm too tired of this.
He not only had depression, which he's kind of overcome with the help of Syl, but then he also got PTSD on top of that.
Right, and he needed to protect people to the point where in one of the books he had, like, an emotional breakdown because he wanted to protect both sides. He blue-screened of death in the middle of a battle. And so, like, he is now past that. And he's going to learn how to play a flute until the wind can play it back. So, like, that's cool. I was really interested in seeing where that went.
They had the most traditionally magic-y story, I think.
They did. Yeah. Well, and it was also set up like a boss rush. Every day, Szeth was going to fight someone with cool magic powers, and there were different magic powers each time, and there was a mystery of, like, what was going on. There was a voice talking to him in his flashbacks. Do you remember who you thought was most likely to be the voice, who you thought it was?
I thought it was Odium the whole time, I think, or something like that,
so.
Right?
At one point, I was like, I think this might be a weird version of Honor, is what I came up with. But yeah, that was another thing where, like, Sanderson clearly told you that something was wrong, but he never gave you enough clues to be able to figure out who it was or what was going on. Okay. You want to just talk about each of these stories in turn? Like, what happened and stuff?
Yeah, let's do it. Really quickly, I want to say this was a very difficult book to read emotionally.
Yes.
And the 2 plot lines that I felt were the most difficult for me were Renarin and Szeth.
Okay, yeah.
And they are 2 very different characters, but they are both heavily autistic coded. Renarin, Sanderson has basically just come out and said, like, yes, that is what I intended him to be. I don't know if he's done the same for Szeth. But there were moments where I was like, I have to put this down because this is ringing so true with my lived experience that it's painful to read.
Absolutely. I don't remember what you said that reminded me of this, but going back to our expectations and what we thought was going to happen, I thought for sure that this book was going to end with party wipe. I thought Odium was going to win, and the only people that survive were going to be people like Sigil who got off planet, and I thought that the next 5 books, because I knew it was 2 arcs, I thought it was going to be a new group of Knights Radiant that have even less power than the one before.
10,000 years in the future, Kaladin Stormblessed comes back from hell to be like, hey, bad shit's coming. Look out.
I thought for sure he wasn't going to survive. I figured he would be one of the ones to, like, oh, hold off Odium's forces while you all jump through the Stargate or whatever. And, you know, that didn't end up happening. I think Sanderson's way of subverting that expectation was very good, but I thought for sure that it... And I didn't even necessarily think that the clues were pointing that way. I just thought that made the most sense if you're going to do 2 arcs. The first one has to kind of end on a bummer in order for the second one to happen. Sanderson is not going to do, and then everyone lived happily forever. Here's 5 books of them just picking out what type of tea to buy at the market, you know?
Absolutely. You know what else I want to say before we get point by point into character arcs, if you don't mind?
Sure.
I mentioned earlier that classism and racism are big through lines in Sanderson's work. Every single one of his books has some element of that in it. In this book, specifically, a lot of that comes to a head because the racial tensions on Roshar are so high. The Alethi, which is most of our main characters, are a people of like conquering spirit, right? They've murdered and pillaged and done all these terrible things, and war is like their main export. They're known as being the guys who are really good at war.
Yes.
So when this book came out, there are people who responded very badly to it.
Oh.
Because the elements of racism and classism kind of came to the forefront, and because we have a main character who is gay, and that plays a big role in his character arc in this book. Renarin is exploring his feelings for R'lain, and he wants to be like what he considers a regular Alethi high prince. He wants to make his father proud, and he thinks like, I can't be gay and do that. I'm already weird in all these other ways because of the autism and the epilepsy. And so like, a lot of people had criticisms of that. And I just want to say, if you didn't like that in this book, these books are not for you. you don't have to read them. This isn't new. I don't feel like it was put in the series from a place of like, if I put this in the series, more people will read it because being woke makes you a lot of money right now. I think it was put in there because Sanderson genuinely wanted to represent the characters that he has the best that he did. And he even published an article right after this book was published and all of the backlash started happening where he was like, look, I came up with Renarin in like 2005. This was always where his story was going. I'm sorry you don't like it.
Yes. I alluded to this earlier. I wanted to talk about this before we got into the details. We were, this book is set up in 10 days. We were on like, maybe like day 5 or something. We were not reading very quickly. And I got a YouTube recommendation for I'm done with the Cosmere, or I'm done with Brandon Sanderson. And I went, oh no, because I knew this book was the end of an arc. And so I thought surely what was going to happen was he fumbled the Contest of Champions, or like something really stupid happened. Like if Dalinar went up and he's like, I choose love, or if the entire book turned out to be a dream or something, like that would have been very disappointing. And so I was nervous. And then we got closer and closer to the end, and I went, so far, this feels like all of his other books in terms of like tone and how well it's written, how the magic is progressing and the character interactions. I wonder what it is. And we got to like day 9, I think, and I went, oh, there's gay characters. There's 2 gay characters who are on screen talking about their feelings. Before, the only gay rep we had in this story was 2 guys who got married, and they are explicitly said, like, you married a guy, and a bunch of people are like, yeah, it's cool to be married to a guy if you're a guy, that's fine.
That's super manly.
But, like, this is a main character, and we're inside of his head seeing the gay thoughts, and a little bit of the gay panic, like, oh god, does he like me? I don't know. Which, I've heard is very common in those circles. There was a character who filled out the proper forms to be recognized as a man, despite being born as a woman. The whole dark eyes, light eyes construct starts to come into play. And so, yes, I did eventually watch that video because I needed to know what they were talking about. I read it, I watched it after I finished the book to see if they had what I would consider valid criticisms. And the answer is, I would not consider their criticisms to be valid. You can read a book and you can be offended by the inclusion of redheaded characters. I don't get it, but you can be mad about redheaded characters, but I'm just going to continue to be like, yeah, they're a character with red hair. I don't care.
Exclamation Point has a video about, what is that series called about the alchemist?
Full Metal Alchemist? What do you mean?
No, the one with the female, like, she makes poisons and stuff. She's like a pharmacist in another world.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I'll find it and I'll show it to you. But Exclamation Point has this video and he basically talks about how the reason some feminist stories work...
Oh, Apothecary Diaries.
Thank you. Alchemist.
She is not, it's not an isekai. It just happens to take place in that time.
Yes. There is a show, I think, called Pharmacist in Another World. But anyway,
there's always an X in Another World. There's probably I was a dental hygienist and I got sucked into the world of giant fox women or something. That probably exists.
I see where your brain is. No, but listen, Explanation Point had this video where he talks about the reason that some feminist stories work for your average anime watching audience, which tends to be men between a certain age range, and some of those feminist stories don't, is because some come across as they're looking at you and they're going, you're a bad person if you don't know feminism is cool. And some of them, it leads the viewer to that conclusion without telling them.
Yes.
Right? And so I think there were some parts in this book where I would understand someone saying, it kind of felt like I was being preached at. But also I don't care. Like, overall, I don't think that it didn't make sense for these elements to be there. And I think they were handled to the best of Brandon's ability. I think that he has always tried as an author to be respectful of his fans and the different things that he includes. He got a sensitivity reader when he started writing a character who uses a wheelchair, and I think he did a pretty good job with her. And so, like, I just don't like the idea that this is like a book ruining thing or a betrayal or anything like that.
Also, listen, one of us has stronger opinions about politics and a stronger desire to get out that old soapbox and get on top of it. And the other one has said this isn't the space to talk about those things. I'm going to momentarily, as the king of this King of the What Now podcast.
King of the what
King
now?
of the what? I'm king of the podcast. I'm going to kind of just put a. I'm gonna get really close to this microphone. Gay people and trans people and women are all super cool, and we should support them. And anyone who thinks that they're not cool can get the out of this space.
You know, it's funny. I was going to ask at the end of the podcast if we could get a trans rights, but like, we don't need to, I guess.
In this political climate. No, the other thing too that I saw that it didn't even occur to me, right? Like there was a character who was very obviously Sanderson saying, here's how the Azimir handle trans characters. They fill out a form because they're the Azish. That's how they figure out all of their problems.
Their society is entirely based on bureaucracy.
Right, exactly. So there were certain moments where I was like, oh, this makes sense. But there were also people who were like, I saw two versions of this. One was they made Szeth seem like a child in this, and the other one was Kaladin seems like he's not a fighter. He used to be this cool soldier. And I don't know if people who have those complaints read the same book series that I did, because Kaladin very clearly had this journey. He blue screened of death in the second book. I think it was the second book. Maybe it was the third one. He had a moment where he tried to save people, and he had to have the power of friendship, and people go, maybe it's time that we save you. And then he had another book where he tried to commit suicide and was only saved by basically the grace of God and the love of his lost brother. And so for someone to be like, it's weird that he's not like out to kill, I don't think you know how this works. I think Kaladin is on his own little journey.
Yeah, well, and I think it comes back to a problem that you have gotten much better at as a writer, but I think there are people who only see wow, cool robot, and they miss all of the really, like, meaningful interpersonal stuff.
Yeah.
And to me, those, like, relationships and emotions are what make a story. I write stories that are much more emotion-focused and emotion-heavy than you do,
Yes.
even though we both write in fantasy settings.
Oh, yeah.
And so for somebody to be like, well, Kaladin should be a cool soldier guy, are we even reading the same books?
That's exactly it. And Szeth acting like a child, I will actually agree that in this book, there are parts where he feels more childlike, in my opinion. Maybe that's because the flashbacks are when he's a child. But no, I do think that there's more of that. But I also think that it fits with his character. I think he has always been like this, and this is the first book where we get a lot of viewpoint into how he acts. And to me, it makes me go, oh, I get the first 4 books now. I get his arc.
I get it now, because this whole time you've been like, you didn't have to kill people, though. There was a rock. But, like, a child's thinking is, this is the rules I was given. I have to follow the rules, especially if you're a neurodivergent child. I want to touch on Szeth really quick, and we'll kind of describe his arc. But psychologist hat here, there's a thing in psychology that happens called age regression, where when you start like unpacking your trauma, you basically kind of revert to that mental age that you were when all of that stuff happened. So Szeth has gone back to the place where he was a child and was dependent on other people, and those people kept failing him over and over. And he's got this person here who's finally being like the responsible adult he needed in the form of Kaladin, and I think that's why we see a lot of that childishness coming out. I think it's pretty well done from a psychological point of view.
Also, I'm so sorry that we have ADHD on this podcast. The other thing I want to talk about really quick is, you know, oh, Kaladin is more emotional in this book, and oh, who cares about Renarin, and oh, this, that, and the other thing. I think, and maybe this is because, you know, Sanderson has said himself that he has some kind of neurodivergency. He doesn't classify it as autism. He doesn't meet those symptoms, but he has something. And maybe because my brain chemistry is similar to his. But, you know, wow, cool robots. I really liked that prologue with the magic gravity wizard fighting a guy in magic armor. I thought that was so cool. And then I got depressed guy, and I was like, who cares about depressed guy? But the ideals that are sworn hit me. Oathbringer has the best one with someone swearing an ideal, and I could hear You Say Run playing in the background, and it almost brought me to tears on my first read, which is rare for me. Usually I have to reread something before I get like the full emotional impact. And so I think that this book series is actually pretty good at like you said, kind of leading people to caring about the emotions of the people. Some people just don't want emotions in their stories, and that's fine. There's lots of other stories you could read that don't have as much emotion in them.
Yeah.
Kaladin and Szeth.
Yes, so let's describe what was going down with them. Dalinar looked at Kaladin, and he said, sorry, Joel looked like he was about to say something.
I opened my mouth. No, really quick. If you reread these books, you will notice that Szeth and Kaladin have always been on parallel journeys. And at one point in these books, Kaladin says something like, wow, we have a lot in common. But like, no, seriously, they have a lot in common. Sorry, go on.
A lot in common. So Dalinar's like, hey, listen, buddy, Szeth is gonna go cleanse his homeland, whatever that means. I don't have time to be concerned about that. But you can't fight here. You can't lead your squad. So would you go with him? There's a herald there.
There's a crazy guy.
And I think maybe you could fix the herald while you're there, and that would help me with this. And Kaladin's like, oh man, I kind of wanted to be the champion. And Dalinar's like, buddy, you were never going to be my champion. I'm my own champion. I'm better than everybody else. Which is like relatable in a mood. So Kaladin's like, fine, I'll go with Szeth. And before he leaves, Hoyd is like, hey, take this flute. Good luck inventing therapy. And Kaladin's like, what the fuck is therapy?
Also, if you're one of those people who have no idea about the Cosmere, back before the one true god was killed, I'm positive they lived on a planet with electricity and tablets and spaceships. And then when they killed God, for some reason, they got regressed back in time. Because the things that Hoyd knows about are not things that would exist in a fantasy setting. So I'm almost positive they lived in like a ancient Atlantis advanced technology.
Dragon Planet probably still has iPads.
Probably. I mean, there was an iPad in one of his other books, one of his standalones.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yes. So the whole Kaladin Szeth story is Kaladin trying to give therapy to Szeth while Szeth is doing this boss rush fight. Each day he fights one of the honor bearers. They have the honor blades, which belong to the heralds. Not going to get into that. If you've made it this far, you know what we're talking about.
Or you don't and you're happy to be confused.
Each day he's a little more like, man, I really don't want to kill people. I'm really not having a good time. And Kaladin's like, maybe we could explore those feelings. And Szeth opens up very gradually. Szeth's Spren is like, this is no good. I don't think you should be having feelings.
He tells on Szeth. He goes to get the superior officer. He goes to get Nail, who is also mentally ill. He's also, if you haven't read these books, Nail is a guy, he represents justice. He is the only herald to have joined his own orders of Knights Radiant, and his Knights Radiant are horny for justice. They will go up to someone and say, you stole an apple, I will kill you now, and just run you through with a sword, and they won't even care.
I am the law.
But then they will see someone take a gun, guns don't exist, but like take a bow and arrow and shoot someone in the eye, and they will look at the guy who shot the arrow and say, do you have forms for that? And they'll go, yeah, I'm the king, I'm allowed to do it. And they go, carry on, you killed a guy, but at least it was lawful. And Nail needs the law. That is his one anchor in this world. So he shows up and he goes, Szeth, are you trying to break the rules? Are you trying to do something that I don't think you should be allowed to do? That's not cool.
Exactly. And Kaladin tries to do some therapy with Nail. That goes in an amazing direction. I'm not even going to spoil it for you. We'll shout out scenes that were particularly good for us later. But ultimately, Kaladin realizes this whole time I've been trying to treat Szeth like he's me, right? I am a soldier who became overwhelmed by all of the death and the killing involved in soldiery, and I had to learn to step back and prioritize myself. But Szeth is not that. Szeth was a child who was pushed into killing by other people and was never allowed to actually be a child. So that's kind of his big realization, and that's, again, why I think Szeth's childishness plays such a big role.
I think it also, I had a slightly different reading on how Kaladin and Szeth's, interactions worked. The way I saw it, Kaladin chose to be a soldier, and he eventually got overwhelmed by all the killing, and he got PTSD, and he said, I don't want to do this anymore. But what he realized was that Szeth never got to choose. The choice was the important part, and choice is one of those Pee-wee's Big Adventure words of the day or whatever.
We chose.
But yeah, so his point, at one point I think someone says, should no one be soldiers? And Kaladin's like, well, we need soldiers. And they're like, so everyone should be soldiers. And he's like, everyone should be allowed to choose whether they want to be soldiers or not.
What is my dog doing in my lap?
She's looking for love and attention.
She chose.
Yeah.
Gigi doesn't usually like love listeners, so this is really weird. She does like it when I'm podcasting. This is the second time she's tried to crawl into my lap during the episode.
It's this room. She does it with me when I'm working as well.
Pay attention to me.
Pay attention. Okay. So
that was Szeth and Kaladin. Do you want to kind of summarize each plot thread and then talk about them, or do you want to talk about this one and then move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it in detail.
So I mentioned that this was very difficult for me to read emotionally. When you are a neurodivergent person, a lot of the time social conventions don't make any sense to you, right? Someone's like, we make eye contact when we talk, and you're like, why? And they're like, well, it's rude. And you're like, why is it rude? And they can't explain it to you, right? So you kind of learn, if I learn what the rules are, and I'm really rigid about the rules, I will be doing it correctly. And then you do that, and someone goes, why are you being such a freak about what the rules are? And that's Szeth's whole story. This whole time he's been trying to figure out what is the right thing to do. Who is the authority who can tell me definitively this is right and this is wrong? And he has to, in the modern day, come to the conclusion that, like, nobody knows. Everybody else is just making it up. None of the rules that people claim to follow do they actually follow 100% of the time. But he constantly is doing this thing in his flashbacks where he is trying his best to follow the rules as they've been explained to him, and then is punished for doing that.
Yes, his biggest fuck-ups are when he basically follows a rule that everyone else is like, that was never a rule, what do you mean?
Yeah, and so that was really hard for me, just because, like I said, I have had those experiences. I've had them recently where I've been ranting about something, and you've been like, well, babe, I don't think that's that important to people. And I'm like, why?
Absolutely. That's another huge thing about this book, is it's all about the clash of different perspectives. I don't know if it was really a theory, but the number 10 keeps showing up throughout this story. There's 10 different types of gemstones that can hold different types of magic. There's 10 orders of Knights Radiant. There's 10 surges. So I thought that there were 10 unique people throughout the world, and there's a lot more than that. But, like, there's Thaylenahs, Thaylins. There are people with long white eyebrows. Where did you get the long white eyebrows from? There are the Alethi, who are these kind of big warlike people. There's the, they called the Kavedians? It doesn't matter. There's a group of people that are, like, Irish kind. They have, like, red hair and they have paler skin. I thought there were going to be 10 people, and I thought for sure that there was going to be a reveal that, like, back in the day there was, like, one group, and then something happened and 10 leaders split up and founded their own nation, and that's why we have the guy who did Thaylenah had long white eyebrows, so all of his children and all of his people got the white eyebrows, and all of the Iriali got the golden hair. That didn't happen in this book. Might happen in a later book.
Also, the Iriali aren't from Roshar, but that's not important right now.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. None of them are from Roshar. None of the humans on here. I know. I know. But no, there's a lot of different perspectives, and Szeth has a hard time with that. And then he comes to realize that he is a person, and he does make choices. To go to the very end of Szeth's story, this book is pretty good, but there's a couple of places where I kind of, like, raised an eyebrow and went, I might need to reread this again to try to, like, understand what Sanderson was going for, or maybe Sanderson didn't communicate his ideas as well as he could have. I personally did not fully understand Szeth swearing the fifth ideal at first. He's fighting a bunch of guys, and they're beating him up, and he's there, and he basically says, like, I am the law, which we've been told is the fifth ideal. I don't understand what about that situation caused him to realize that he was the law. And I realized when I thought about it, it was him realizing that he can trust himself and that he's his own moral compass. But I just still I don't think that scene communicated it well.
very Kantian ethics, this idea that everybody has an innate sense of right and wrong inside of them and it will lead them to the right choices just by happenstance.
Yeah, well, and Szeth's whole thing was, Nail's whole thing was, I don't know how to know if I know what is right or wrong, and Nail's gonna get therapy. Szeth got therapy, but I just didn't feel that it really led to you can trust yourself completely, which is what I thought I Am the Law meant. It does not matter. It was a good scene regardless.
I think that Kaladin was the first person to say that he trusted Szeth to make choices and follow through on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
But yeah, read it again. I'm curious what to hear how it hits you on your second read through. Mm-hmm. This book was kind of the culmination of Kaladin's arc as a character. So he started as a person who wanted to protect people.
Yes.
He became so wrapped up in protecting people as his identity that he wasn't capable of doing it anymore because there are too many people to protect and you can never protect them all, and when you fail, that's you, that's not the rest of the world. Moash didn't kill Elhokar. That was Kaladin's fault for not stepping in and stopping Moash.
Yes. Well,
right?
And it's very Deku coded. You can't save other people if you break your legs fighting the first battle. So Kaladin can't keep fighting to protect people. He's eventually going to get so hurt that he can't protect the next group of people.
Right. So he kind of pulled himself back. He put a Band-Aid on his mental health. He started figuring some things out. And then the climax of this arc is he goes, you know what? I am a protector. That is a person that I want to be. And I can be that person without losing myself to it. That was a really beautiful scene.
You have said like, oh, if I got a tattoo, maybe I'd get one related to the Cosmere, and you've had a couple of different ideas, a lot of them related to your boyfriend from the other series. I really do think that I will protect myself so that I can protect others was beautiful. I would almost be willing to get that as a tattoo if I got tattoos.
Yes, you can get that, and I can get the danger glyph, and it will well sum up the difference between us.
Absolutely. I need to shout out, so as we said, there's a boss rush. Each of these people have different abilities, and eventually they start getting creative. He gets jumped by 2 guys at once at one point, and so he's going to these temples, and once he gets to the temple, he has to fight the person in that temple. But these guys jump him, like, outside, like, the day before he was going to arrive, and they're like, we're gonna get you in your sleep. But I have to shout out the Lightweaver Temple with Moss, because Syl came in and was like, hey, do you need help? And he was like, I don't think I'm allowed to ask for help. And she's like, no one told me that I wasn't allowed to help, so let me help you. We are going to, in Stormlight 6 through 10, we are going to get someone who's bonded to like 2 different Spren, or we're going to get 1 Spren bonded to 2 people. We're going to start getting more interesting forms of the Nile bond in later books. And I think that Syl coming over to help him was very good. The Spren are their own characters in this book. I think they kind of always have been in Sanderson's mind, but very rarely did we get Pattern making choices. Very rarely did we get Syl making choices. But Syl is paving the way for what an independent Spren looks like in this.
She absolutely is, yeah. Have I sent you the meme that's going around that says, you better not mess with my gang, or you'll be messing with Oopie Goopy, Lil Jim Bob, General Munchkin Man, and worst of all, Larry.
I don't know if I've seen that, but I can picture it in my head.
That's the honor bearers. The Stoneward one was Oopie Goopy.
Absolutely. Anything else about this? Oh, hang on, I have one more. Nightblood is learning abilities. Nightblood as a sword is evolving. And he's learning new techniques, and what is up with that? Nightblood is a character from another book, and he's a very interesting character. And if you listen to Word of God, like outside of the books, if you listen to interviews that Sanderson has done, Q&As, Nightblood was created to be a Shardblade. He is an artificial version of this magic weapon that can only be found on Roshar, and they did it wrong. They did a Frankenstein. They didn't realize what they were creating until they created it. But he has a mind, and he's learning, and now he's going to become a better Shardblade than all of the other Shardblades.
Yeah, Kaladin somehow ends up giving therapy to a sword and to a Spren in this book accidentally. So, no, that was amazing.
Anything else you want to say about this character journey, Shinovar.
No, we are going to get into moments that hit us really hard at the end of the podcast. So I will save the last thing.
one.
The one. You know the one. The stand up and ah!
Absolutely. Adolin and Azimir, do you want to describe kind of the overarching plot?
Yes, I sure do. So Adolin is having a bad time with his dad. Because
as we all do.
He has discovered that his dad was responsible for his mom's death. He feels like his dad is a hypocrite because he's leaning on this, I'm a very honorable man, but he's done all these terrible things. The terrible things were honorable by the definition of, like, keeping your word, but Adolin doesn't like that. He doesn't like that it's bad and those bad things have not had consequences. Kind of like you murdering someone, Adolin. So they're like, hey, Odium's going to attack a whole bunch of places to try to claim land before the time limit, before he can't claim anymore for his side. One of those places is going to be Azimir. And Azimir's like, we need help. We can't do this by ourselves. And Adolin's like, I volunteer. I'll go.
Yeah.
Let me go.
If I can get as far away from my dad as frickin' possible.
And Dalinar's like, hey. And he's like, I'm leaving now. And they don't actually have, like, a conversation about their feelings. Adolin just goes.
Navani even says, like, could you two please just make up already? And both of them are like, no. The other one screwed up and the other one won't listen to me.
The other one's being unreasonable, which is a very father-son coded thing to have happen, honestly. So Adolin goes. While he is there, he befriends Emperor Yanagawan, who is not actually allowed to have friends. In Azimir, the Emperor is more a symbol than anything else, so, like, people can put in for a lottery to watch him eat and sleep, and nobody's allowed to talk to him directly. They'd have to talk to his High Vizier, who then communicates the information to him.
Different perspectives.
Yes. So it's very weird, right? And Adolin is a guy who is all about bringing people together. He has poor boundaries with his own soldiers. He goes, like, drinking and stuff with the common soldier, even though he's a commander.
That's not... Okay, according to Adolin, he doesn't have poor boundaries, but according to the Azish, he is a boor who is, B-O-O-R.
Yes. According to me, he has poor boundaries. That's not how a commanding officer should comport himself. But he does, right? And he's a golden retriever of a man who just wants people to get along. And he sees this teenage boy, basically, who was thrust in the position of emperor. And he's like, I'm here. I'm going to support you. I'm going to be your friend because you don't have any. And throughout the arc, he teaches Yanagawan about strategy and tactics, basically, through a card game. While that is happening, they are fighting a battle. They're trying to hold a position called an Oath Gate. And it's not great.
It's the ghost portal from Danny Phantom.
Right. They are trying to stop all the ghosts that are coming through. The enemy can field basically infinite soldiers. Like, it's not really infinite, but they have a lot on the other side of this Oath Gate. And it's very challenging for Adolin to get reinforcements because they can't come through the Oath Gate, so they have to travel over land or by air.
And additionally, the bad guys have magic powers, and most of the people in Azimir are regular soldiers. They do not have the ability to fly or teleport or light weave an imaginary horse.
Right. They couldn't spare any of the Windrunners for reasons, essentially. Most of the Windrunners are on the Shattered Plains. The other ones had to go with a guy called the Mink to another place.
To save fantasy Spain, basically.
Yes.
Is how I imagine it.
Which was very cool, but that's an aside. Anyway, so he expects soldiers to be brought as backup, and they're not. And eventually they get to the point where the people on the front lines can't even get a rest because they don't have enough soldiers to cycle in and out.
Yeah. Adolin loses a leg.
Yep, I was getting there. Adolin loses a leg. Adolin goes, "Fuck this!" And he stands there and he fights a bunch of people off with just a sword because he's so cool while he's got his, like, peg leg wedged into some rocks. Ultimately, he survives this horrible battle where he should have died and is taken out of there by Yanagawan and some of his other friends that he's made along the way. Friendship truly was the most important thing. They go to reclaim the palace. They reclaim the palace, and it turns out that it's Adolin's relationship with Maya that has mattered this whole time.
And his relationship with his armor, and his relationship with Yanagawan.
His relationships that he's built, right. So his whole thing this whole time has been, in order to be a Knights Radiant, you have to swear oaths, And he doesn't like that because he doesn't think there's anything of value in just holding your word.
Remember what I said. If you decide to punch a guy every day, so long as you do it, you're doing right.
Right, exactly. So he doesn't want to be that. But he also feels like, as a regular guy, basically, in a world of Knights Radiant, he's become obsolete. He can't fight back against these world-shattering powers. And so his arc is kind of learning, like, no, your perspective is valuable, and these relationships that you've formed are just as important as having powers, because these relationships are what allowed you to succeed and survive.
The other thing that Sanderson kept pointing out that I noticed, that I was like, oh, this is the point, right? You're right, that his relationships and Maya is super important. But the other thing that I kept noticing being brought up is Adolin is bothered by Dalinar, but he can't quite put his finger on why. Like, as you said, Dalinar killed his mom, but there's some play there where he's trying to figure it out, and then near the end, he has his realization, and it's basically, he thought that Dalinar was perfect, and then found out that he wasn't. And if Dalinar can't be perfect, then who can? And I guess Adolin just didn't read the transcripts of how what Dalinar's oath looked like in Oathbringer, because, you know, it's not about who you are now, it's about who you're trying to be and how well you are able to keep to that kind of thing.
So his big emotional character payoff is that he doesn't have to be his dad.
Yes.
And that's fine.
Mm-hmm. No one is perfect, but we're all trying our best as well as we can.
Yes, I loved Adolin's story. I thought it was so beautifully well done. Didn't hit me emotionally the same way that the Szeth story did, but that's not a bad thing, right? The Szeth story was painful for me to read. The Adolin story was just beautiful.
Yes.
And the stand-up and cheer moment was so big.
It absolutely was.
I learned that phrase recently, and I'm going to use it too much.
100%. I completely forgot. I wanted to bring this up in the Szeth part. The foreshadowing in this book series, in this book, is really, really good. We were talking about Szeth thinking that, you know, things should have a right answer or a wrong answer. Hasina, Kaladin's mom, to Kaladin says, at early, chapter 4 or something, do you want the world to only have simple answers? And Kaladin goes, no, I don't think that's best. So basically, Kaladin, by being in a mentally healthy state, and potentially by talking to his mom, because he has a really good family dynamic compared to Szeth, whose family kind of abandoned him at different points. But that's foreshadowing. Kaladin is directly told kind of what it basically, you can't have a child's view that the world is complex, and then he has to kind of help Szeth see that there are complexities in life, and I thought that was really cool. There was another one of super cool foreshadowing that I was going to bring up here, and I've now forgotten what it was.
Maya? There was a super cool moment of foreshadowing with the Maya Adolin stuff. At one point during the battle, Maya's like, Adolin, I could go get help. And Adolin is like, are you sure? Because if you go back to Shadesmar to go get help, I won't be able to use you as a sword. And she's like, no, I think I can do it. I really want to help. She's really excited about this idea. And Adolin's like, okay, you go. Go get your friends. Come back. Hopefully they can help in time. And throughout the entire arc, basically, I forgot the word arc for a second, but throughout the entire thing, he keeps thinking like, I really don't know that those honor spren Maya went to get are going to help. I don't know what they could do. And stuff, yeah. But at the very beginning, when Adolin first went to Shadesmar, we see a whole bunch of Deadeyes leaving Lasting Integrity, where the honor spren live, and that's who Maya went to get.
Yes.
That was the foreshadowing. Those are her friends. And so when they come, they can just be shard blades and armor, just like she has been a shard blade for him this whole time. So that was really cool. We'll talk about it more in a little bit. But that was a neat piece of foreshadowing. Anything else you wanted to say about Adolin and Maya and everything going on?
Adolin has a rival. I mean, Kaladin had a rival in the last book. There was a what are they called? What are the heavenly ones? There's a heavenly one that he fights. Here's the thing about Fused. If you kill one, they can come back. And they keep coming back. That's why we have the Oath Pact, is to try to keep all of those specific ghosts from coming through.
Yeah, Leslie was briefly trans in the last book. What are people complaining about in this one? She inhabited the body of a male Parshendi, or listener, singer, whatever you want to call them, but she's a woman, so she's still dressed and, like, presented herself as a woman.
But anyways, so Kaladin had a rivalry with Leshwi. He kept defeating her, and she kept coming back, and they had, like, this kind of honorable thing going on between them. And in this book, Adolin and Shallan at the very beginning of the book fight a guy. His name isn't Skibbity. It's
Skibbity the Monarch.
Skibbity the Monarch. I think it's Abity or something like that. I'm going to call him Skibbity. But he basically is like, I'm going to defeat you. And also, I think you're a Radiant. And Adolin's like, I'm not a Radiant. I don't know what you mean. And they fight a couple of times over and over again. And another stand-up and cheer moment, they're fighting in a closed room and no one's allowed to see in, and Skibbity is messing with him. He's like, I'm super powerful, you can't fight me, what are you gonna do? But the armor he's wearing is Adolin's armor, and Adolin has the ability to form bonds with Deadeyes and bring them back. We never heard about Honorspren being Deadeyes, but I mean, that's how it works. It works the same way as the shards. And so basically at one point while Skibbity is like choking him, Adolin's like, help me. And the armor goes, oh, help! And the armor goes onto him. And then you just get because they're fighting in a closed room, basically the camera zooms out into the hallway and Skibbity just gets knocked through the wall. And then Adolin comes through and just crushes him with a foot. He's like, you are dead.
Ohio ass Riz level 0 gat.
Yeah, exactly. And then he's going to come back again. As far as I know, I don't think the Fused are like dead. I think they're going to continue to be able to be reincarnated. So Adolin has a rival into the future. Anyways, I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, and like, we don't know how far into the future it's going to be when they come back because the Oath Pact has been reformed. So they're trapped on Braze until somebody breaks.
Okay.
Basically. Or until the Oath Pact melts down fully. But eventually they'll come back and like Adolin might be like 50 by the time Skibbity is like, you!
It'll be Adolin's son, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yes, oh man. But yeah, that's kind of all the thoughts that I had for now on Adolin. Go.
The next one on the list is Jasnah over in Thaylenah. And Jasnah is interesting. I keep mentioning that there are characters that will show up in books 6 through 10. I think we're going to have a little section where we try to go through and rack our brains and figure out all the things that have been mentioned that didn't have a payoff. But there's 10 orders of Knights Radiant, and there's a couple that, like, Sanderson is explicitly not telling us about. Jasnah has sworn 4 ideals, 3 of which are unique to her order. We don't know what they are. She has some kind of mental illness when she was younger, and I can't remember. We get a little bit of a description on it, but I can't remember if it actually describes anything, or if it was something, like, kind of vague. So she's going to come back later. But here's the deal.
Where?
Jasnah is a very logical person. She is so logical that, like, her relationship with her mom is kind of frayed because she's a little bit almost too, like, right and wrong, kind of black and white thinking.
Autism is genetic and she's Renarin's cousin.
Yeah, exactly. Navani has her own kind of, like, things need to be neat and orderly, although that's more kind of, like, OCD a lot of times.
Daladar was autistic and his special interest was war. Go ahead.
So Jasnah is in Thaylen City, and there's a ship coming to attack them. And so the first thing that they're doing is they're trying to prepare to defend themselves. But then they realize that ship is not actually full of soldiers. It's basically a smoke tactic or whatever. And so Jasnah sends most of the soldiers away because there's not actually going to be a war at Thaylenah. But then God, one of the gods, Odium shows up. The bad one that we don't like. He shows up and he goes, hey, do you want to debate as to whether or not the queen of this country should abdicate to me, basically surrender peacefully, or whether she should continue to be in alliance with you? And Jasnah's like, okay, sure. And Jasnah is so anal retentive and so logical and so, like, she prepares that she stays up super late, and she tries to look into all of these different cases, and now she's in a tired state, and she's arguing with Odium. She's not at her best because she's tired, and Odium knows her because the guy who has the power, the guy who used to be mortal, knew her well, and then he became a god, and he basically tricks her into saying things that she shouldn't say in front of Fen. So she basically says a queen must be cutthroat and must kill people if that's what it takes to keep her throne safe. I would cut everyone out of my life. And then the camera zooms over, and Fenn's there, and she goes, "You'd cut people out of your life? Like, would you cut me out of your life? I wouldn't cut people out of my life." And so, Fenn ultimately goes to Odium because of the way Jasnah talked and because of Jasnah's specific, I must be right, I was having too much fun debating.
Yeah, and Odium's whole thing is Jasnah's going to make my argument for me. And ultimately what it comes down to is Jasnah's very utilitarian. This whole time she's been greatest good for the greatest amount of people. And Odium's but you don't actually believe that. You don't live that way. At the end of the day, you prioritize your family and your people over everyone else. And yet he argues Jasnah into a corner where Queen Fenn is I'm going to prioritize my people. If even Jasnah would do it, that's what I have to do.
Yep, absolutely. And so Jasnah's story basically ends in defeat. She has a little piece that she helps with Sigil's story, but for the most part, the story ends with her basically being I'm worthless and my own logic is not based on a strong foundation. So I'm going to guess that in books 6 through 10, I think she's going to reset her oaths. I think Jasnah is basically going to be hey, Ivory, I don't deserve to be a Knight Radiant. I need to do some soul searching, but I think she'll eventually claw her way back to where she was. She'll be a better queen for having had this and being able to recover from it.
And she's kind of cool. She wants democracy and stuff, which some people believe is a good thing.
She wants to end slavery, and she wants to have more merit-based kind of appointments and egalitarian stuff. I do think that Odium doesn't play fair. And, he's a god. He doesn't have to play fair, but, Jasnah almost kind of couldn't have won no matter how her arguments went. But one thing that Odium does try to say is, hey, I can see farther in the future, so I know better what's for the greatest good. But Odium, you lie. So, why would I know you can theoretically show people the specific things that are true so that they think that you're all-knowing, but you're not. You're not. You don't know. You get beat in this book. You get outsmarted by the world's dumbest man. By the man.
Don't talk about our dad that way.
No, but throughout these books, they keep talking about how Dalinar has no diplomacy. And in this book, he actually shows that he has a little bit more than he has before. But he's not known as a smart man, and he outsmarts a guy with godlike power.
I think I was reading a summary of previous books or something, but somebody talked about how Gavilar and Dalinar were basically street urchins.
Yes.
And then they took over the world, basically, right? But Dalinar as a city thug is so funny to me because he's been put in this position of power where he has to pretend to be domesticated, but he's not. He's feral, and it comes out sometimes. But you forget because Sanderson does such a good job of writing the facade that at no point in book 1 are you yeah, this is just a feral little monkey man.
He is not feral in the later books.
He's not
feral.
Trying not to be.
Well,
it's because of his position, but he was right up until his brother died.
Well,
he was just a street thug.
Right.
You seem confused. I'm not saying that he's a street thug at this very moment, but I'm saying at his core that's who he is. And I really like that everybody else is we remember the way you were 20 years ago. We don't know how we feel about this version. And he's not smart. You saying he's the dumbest man in the Cosmere, that thinking is not his thing. He's the guy you point at a rock to punch through it.
Yes, absolutely. Now, because we love Brandon Sanderson, and we love to talk, and we have so much to say, and there's so much book in this book.
So much book in this book.
I think we're going to have to split up this episode into multiple parts, which was not our intention, which is why I didn't say it at the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah, I realized we'd been recording for 2 hours, and I was do you think I could go to sleep? Can we do a part 2?
No, wife gets to sleep only when we've talked about that one scene from Kaladin's story and the other couple of scenes that are super cool and important. But no, we will be back. We are trying to get into a better recording schedule, and so hopefully part 2 will be up soon. Take care, everyone, and we will be back to discuss the other characters and where we think the series is going as a whole.
This has been your Midway Thought.
No outro? No, I'm going to put an outro
We gotta
here.
put an outro, but maybe we do an outro that's like, do part 2 coming soon. Do part 2 coming soon. Not gonna have a part 3, or maybe we will, because we talk too much. Yeah.
That is the mid. That is. I don't
it
need to
is.
record an
There's our
outro. We
outro.
have it. Goodbye, everyone.